The fluorescent light above the interrogation table had a flicker in it, not constant. Just every few seconds, a brief, stuttering pulse, like it was trying to decide whether to stay on or give up entirely. It was the kind of detail most people wouldn't notice. She noticed it immediately. She had trained herself, over years of sitting still in positions where stillness meant survival, to notice every small thing. The flicker. The hum of the ventilation system in the left corner. The fact that the chair across from her had one leg slightly shorter than the others. The faint smell of burnt coffee coming from somewhere down the hall. She catalogued it all without moving her eyes. Her name was Mara Voss. She was 34 years old. She had a thin scar that ran from just below her left ear to the line of her jaw, pale against her darker skin. The kind of scar people usually invented stories about or looked away from politely. She sat with her hands flat on the table, wrists loose, shoulders level, not rigid, not nervous. Just still in the way that people are still when stillness is something they earned rather than something they fell into. She had been sitting in this room for 47 minutes. She knew that because she had counted. Not by watching the clock on the wall. There was no clock on the wall, which itself told her something about how this room was designed. She knew it by her breathing, long habit, 4 counts in, hold 4, out 4. She had cycled through it enough times to track the minutes like a quiet internal metronome. Outside this building, the night was cold. A Pacific Northwest cold, damp, heavy, the kind that got into your joints and stayed there. The rain had started around 6 in the evening and had not let up since. She had been walking through it when they'd found her. 2 county deputies in a patrol car, rolling slow through the parking lot of a decommissioned rail yard on the edge of town. Their spotlight sweeping across the chain-link fence and the broken concrete, until it found her crouched beside a drainage culvert with a long rifle case open beside her and a spotter's scope in her hand. She understood what it looked like. She hadn't run. She hadn't argued. She had stood up slowly, kept her hands visible, and said nothing at all as they put her in the back of the car. The rifle was a bolt-action .338 Lapua, legal, hers. The scope was a military-grade piece of glass that cost more than most people's monthly rent, also hers. The position she had been sitting in, elevated angle. Clean sightline toward the rail yard's central loading platform. She knew exactly what that looked like to 2 deputies who had received a call about a suspicious person near an active federal. Witness protection safe house 3 blocks east. She had said nothing because saying nothing was almost always the correct first move. The door opened. He came in the way that men who believed in the weight of their own authority always came in, with a kind of deliberate slowness, folder tucked under one arm, coffee cup in hand. The door left just slightly ajar behind him. He was maybe 50, close-cropped gray hair, a sheriff's department jacket over a collared shirt. Not a deputy, the bars on his collar told her he was a detective. His name tag read Connors. He set the coffee down, opened the folder, sat. He looked at her for a long moment without speaking, the way some interrogators did when they wanted you to feel the pressure of silence and break it yourself. She didn't break it. She held eye contact without aggression, just looked back at him the same way she might watch a horizon line. He cleared his throat. "Ms. Voss," he said. "You want to tell me what you were doing out there tonight?" She said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, "Scouting. Scouting." He repeated the word like it tasted strange. "Scouting for what exactly?" "A position," she said. He leaned back, tapped his pen against the open folder. "See, that's the part that concerns me. Because you were less than 300 meters from a location that our department has a significant interest in protecting, with a high-powered rifle, in the rain, at night." He paused. "You want to help me understand that?" She looked at him. "Who do I need to speak to?" He frowned. "You're speaking to me." "I understand that," she said. There was no edge in her voice. No condescension. She said it the way you might correct a mild factual error. I mean, who in this building has federal clearance? A pause stretched out. The fluorescent light flickered twice. Connors put his pen down. Ms. Voss, right now the most pressing issue isn't clearance levels. Right now the most pressing issue is explaining why a woman with no law enforcement or military record on file that you can access, she said. Another pause, longer this time. He studied her face, looking for the crack, the nervousness, the place where she would fold. She watched him do it and gave him nothing, not because she was performing toughness, but because she genuinely was not nervous. She was mildly tired. She was wet. She wanted dry socks and a cup of something hot that wasn't the burnt sludge they had offered her when she came in. But she was not nervous. You're claiming a record we can't see, he said slowly. I'm not claiming anything, she said. I'm telling you that the channel you're pulling my information from is not the relevant channel. Connors stared at her. He picked up his pen again, set it down. He was trying to decide. She could tell whether she was genuinely something else or simply the most controlled liar he had encountered in a long career of sitting across from liars. We have a protocol, he said, for people who impersonate federal agents or military personnel. I haven't said I'm either, she replied. No, he agreed, but you're implying it. And in my experience, people who imply it are usually doing so because the implication itself is the lie. He opened the folder again, pulled out a photograph, a printout from a camera still, grainy. The parking lot at night, her crouched figure visible in the corner of the frame. This is you. This is a rifle. This is a federal protection zone. I need more than implications. She looked at the photograph, then she looked at him. And then she reached into the inside pocket of her jacket. Connors went rigid immediately. His hand moved toward his hip before he even finished the thought. Slowly, he said, his voice dropping a register. She moved slowly. She always moved slowly when it mattered. Her fingers found what they were looking for, a small, heavy disc of metal, maybe an inch and a half across, and she brought it out and set it on the table between them. No drama, no flourish. Just placed it flat on the surface the way you might set down a house key. He looked at it. He didn't recognize it immediately. She watched the moment when he didn't. Then she watched the slower moment when something shifted in the back of his eyes. He leaned forward. The coffee cup was forgotten. He stared at the coin. It was a SEAL Team Challenge coin. But not the kind that circulated in gift shops or got handed to donors at veterans fundraisers. This one was different. It was heavier than standard issue. Its edges were worn in the particular way of something carried for years against a human body. One side bore the Navy SEAL trident, eagle, anchor, pistol, trident, but the detailing was wrong if you didn't know what you were looking at. Subtly wrong. A small, almost invisible modification to the eagle's wing angle. A single line of text in a ring around the outer edge, so small it required you to pick the coin up and tilt it toward the light to read it. Connors picked it up. Tilted it toward the flickering fluorescent. He read the words. She watched him read them. She watched his expression do something complicated and quiet. The practiced authority in his face didn't crumble, men like Connors didn't crumble, but something behind it shifted, like a tectonic thing. Something deep and slow moving in a direction it hadn't moved before. He set the coin back down, very carefully. Where did you get this? He said, not a question. A different kind of sentence entirely. It was given to me, she said, by the team leader who nominated me for the program. A silence fell over the room that was different from the silences before it. The earlier silences had been tactical, his tool, her counter-tool. This one was something else. This one had weight in it. There's no program on record, he said, and his voice had changed. Just slightly. The performance of authority was still there, but something underneath it had become genuine and uncertain. No, she agreed. There isn't. He looked at her, then at the coin. Then at her again. "What were you doing at that position tonight?" he said, and this time it wasn't an interrogation. It was a real question. She let a breath out. The first one she had released with any real ease since she'd come into the room. "There's a man," she said. "He goes by Reitner. He has 2 aliases we've confirmed and at least one we haven't. He is going to attempt to access your protection zone through the north drainage line, not from any street approach. He'll do it in the next 48 hours, based on a pattern we've been tracking for 11 weeks. She paused. "I was identifying the clean angles from the rail yard, because if he comes through that drainage line the way we think he will, the only viable intercept shot is from an elevated position on the west side. Roughly where your deputies found me." Connors had stopped moving entirely. Outside, the rain pressed against the small window near the ceiling. The only window in the room, high up, narrow, the glass running with water. Somewhere further down the hall, a phone rang twice and stopped. "You've been running a parallel surveillance on an asset we have in active protection," he said. "Not parallel," she said. "Convergent. We're working the same problem. You just don't know we exist." She could see him processing. She could see him wanting to dismiss this, wanting to reach for the comfortable explanation. That she was a very articulate, very controlled fraud, someone who had found a coin somewhere. Memorized a few lines, constructed a persona. She could see him wanting that to be true because the alternative required a more difficult kind of thinking. "I need to make a call," he said. "Yes," she said. "You do." He stood, took the coin. She let him take it, then he stopped, turned back. "The name on the coin," he said. "The team leader who gave it to you." She looked at him. "Chief Petty Officer Daniel Rourke," she said. And that was when it happened. That was the moment she had been waiting for, without quite knowing she was waiting for it, because she had not known that Connors would know that name. But he did. She saw it. His body didn't move, he was too experienced for that, but his face did something involuntary. Something behind his eyes came forward very fast, like something surfacing from a very deep place. "You know him," she said quietly. Connors stood in the doorway for a long moment. The door was still slightly ajar. The sound of the rain was barely audible. The flickering light pulsed once, twice, then steadied for a moment as if listening. "Danny Rourke," Connors said, and his voice had lost all of its practiced official register, "was my brother-in-law." The word was past tense. She said nothing. She let the word sit between them and breathe. "He died in 2019, Connors said. His jaw was tight. "They told us he died in a training accident in Virginia," she said. He looked at her. "They told you Virginia," she said softly. "It wasn't Virginia." Another silence, but this one was the heaviest yet. This one had the full mass of grief and unanswered questions, and years of a family not knowing, not being able to know, not being allowed to know. All of that collapsed into a single terrible moment in a fluorescent-lit room that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and wet clothing. "Where?" he said. She met his eyes. There were things she couldn't say. There were walls that did not come down, not even in moments like this, not even for a man whose grief was written plainly on his face, despite his best efforts to hold it behind professional armor. "Somewhere he chose to be," she said, "doing something that mattered with people he trusted. It was not enough. She knew it was not enough. She watched him know it too. But she also watched him take it, actually take it, hold it, breathe through it, in the way of someone who had spent 5 years with no answer at all, and had learned to survive on nothing. And so this small fragment, imprecise and incomplete as it was, landed somewhere in him like water on dry ground. He left the room. She sat alone again. The light flickered. The rain moved against the glass. She pressed her hands flat on the table and closed her eyes for a moment, not meditating, not strategic. Just present in the fatigue of carrying things no one could see. She thought about Danny Rourke. She thought about the morning he had pressed that coin into her hand in a concrete-floored briefing room that smelled like gun oil and instant noodles, and said, without ceremony, "You've earned this more than most men I know. Don't let anyone tell you different." She had not let anyone tell her different. She had not always found it easy not to. 20 minutes passed. The door opened again. This time it was not Connors alone. He came back with a woman in her late 40s, civilian clothes, a gray blazer, dark slacks, the particular kind of unremarkable that was itself a signal. She carried nothing, no folder, no coffee. She sat down across from Mara and looked at her with an expression that was professionally neutral but carried in its depth something close to respect. "Ms. Voss," she said, "my name is Aldrin. I'm going to verify some things with you and then we're going to talk about the next 48 hours. Mara nodded. Connors stood near the door. He had the challenge coin in his hand. He wasn't looking at the woman named Aldrin or at Mara. He was looking at the coin. Turning it slowly between his fingers the way you turn something you've been given permission to finally hold. The verification process took 8 minutes. Aldrin spoke in partial sentences and references, the kind of shorthand that only meant something if you already knew what it meant, and Mara answered in the same register. A call number. A protocol name. A location that had no official name, only a set of coordinates that Mara gave from memory, the way most people recite their own phone number. Aldrin didn't write anything down. She listened, and at the end of it she nodded once, in the small way of someone internally closing a calculation. "The drainage line," Aldrin said. "North access," Mara confirmed. 48 hours is the outside edge. He may move sooner if he feels the net closing. We'll need your position access back. "I know," Aldrin stood, looked at Mara for a moment. "You came in from the regional office." "Solo," Mara said. Something crossed Aldrin's face. Not quite surprise, more like a recognition of something she had suspected. "You've been running this alone," Aldrin said. "The thread was mine," Mara said. "The target is yours." It made sense to merge at the right moment. "Which you determined was tonight." "Which I determined was tonight," she agreed. Aldrin nodded again, looked at Connors. Something passed between them that was professional and logistical, and underneath that, deeply human. Then Aldrin left. Connors stood at the door a moment longer. He looked at Mara. He looked at the coin in his hand. Slowly, he walked back to the table and set it down in front of her. She didn't pick it up immediately. "He talked about a woman once," Connors said. "When he called home, which wasn't often and wasn't long, he mentioned once that there was someone on the team who shouldn't have been possible." He paused. He meant it as the highest thing he knew how to say. Mara looked at the coin, then she picked it up. Her fingers closed around it and she held it in her palm for a moment, the metal cold from sitting on the table, then warming. "He was the best spotter I ever worked with," she said. "He made me better." Connors looked at her. His eyes held something that had no clean name, grief and gratitude, and the strange mercy of finally knowing that someone had been with the person you loved in the place where they disappeared. "Thank you," he said, quietly, like something he had needed to say for a long time and had only just found the right direction to say it in. She nodded. He left. She sat alone one final time in that small room under the flickering light, and she did not cry. Because she had run out of that particular capacity years ago, in a different country, under a different sky. But she felt something move through her chest, something old and heavy and real, and she let it move, and she let it pass. And then she put the coin back into her inside pocket where it lived against her ribs, and she straightened, and she breathed. Outside, the rain had not stopped. It would not stop for some time. The Pacific Northwest kept its weather the way it kept its mountains, fully, unapologetically, without concern for whether you were ready for it. She would go back out into it soon. She would find the position again. She would do the work that needed doing in the dark and the cold, the way she had always done it, without acknowledgement, without record, without the luxury of being understood by anyone who had not been there. That was the life. She had chosen it young, and she had not unchosen it, even when it cost her things that most people did not know were possible to lose. There are people who move through the world in full view, whose names are known, whose faces are documented, whose contributions are framed and hung and spoken about at ceremonies with flags and folded cloth. And there are others who exist in the margins, who carry their proof in their pocket, worn smooth by years of living, heavy with the weight of everything it represents. You will never read their names. You will never know what they prevented, or where they stood, or what they absorbed so that other things could remain intact. But somewhere in a cold and unremarkable room, a coin was placed on a table, and it was enough.